Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, folks, whatever time you're watching this. This is the lecture summary for April 2nd, Prison Subculture. What I want you guys to get out of this lecture, and again, keep in mind that the recalibration is over after April 1st. So this is just a regularly scheduled lecture. That Thursday class didn't get to see any break because it was Friday to Wednesday. And listen, my philosophy is generally I didn't want to stop teaching anyway. So this is how this works. But for this lecture, this is an important lecture because this kind of speaks volumes to what goes on inside a prison. So really what I wanted you to get an idea of out of this lecture is like how a lot of the informal activity is controlled inside of prisons. So, for example, the gang activity. Gang activity is it's something that exists in large degree, and you know, a lot of people say that like the most segregated day of the week is Sunday because of people going to churches, but like one of the most segregated institutions we have is prisons. People tend to segregate according to race. You might have somebody who's like the nicest liberal hipster walking into a prison. They become a white supremacist and become a part of the Aryan Brotherhood in order to survive. People join gangs to survive. Strength in numbers, right? People join the Nation of Islam to survive. People join religious groups to survive in prison. The idea is that like joining a group will gain you protection. And it's those groups that tend to have control over the violence, the drug trade, and the sex trade inside of prison. So what I wanted you to get out of this was the idea of like prison subculture. This is a culture that exists. I'm calling it a subculture because there's not supposed to be any fraternization between prisoners. And there's not supposed to be a separate culture, but there is. And so please pay attention to, I have two lists. One list is like a list from the 1960s of like prison rules and the rules that prisoners follow. And then there's been a big change since then. And then there's that list from 2000, which pretty much represents still today it's a top 10 list of how to survive in prison. And what's interesting is that this is also a discussion of like, which came first, prison culture or street culture? Which one feeds the other? And so if you look at that list of top 10, that's a lot of people out on the streets survive that way. No snitching, no gambling, don't owe anybody anything, be willing to fight and fight dirty. Probably the only thing that a lot of people don't talk about out in the streets is that whatever that was, number 8 or something, is keeping a good porn collection. No one's going to talk about that on the streets, but in prison it's an excellent idea. Because it helps you to keep to yourself and stay out of trouble. So this is what I wanted you to get out of that lecture. There's that little slide at the end where I start to discuss what are those things that spill from prisons into the streets. So like sagging pants, no shoelaces, prison tattoos. I even suspect that like some gang signs started in prison as well, but I have nothing to confirm that with. But we've taken on a lot of prison culture in our society. There's a coolness to it that we really like in American society. Kind of makes zero sense that we're into that, but that's freaking American culture, isn't it? That's just what we're into in order to be cool, which is just to be a troublemaker, generally speaking. I'm also going to attach a small video on women in prison in order to get a view of that prison subculture. But I wanted to focus on women's prisons because of how much of a surprise it may be. People think that, women are women. They're not as violent. They're not as brutal. They get along with each other. They do so well. It's kind of the same. It's kind of the same thing as the men's prisons. So please watch that. Please look at the lecture. Please answer the discussion question online, and that will be your work for this week. Please, folks, stay safe, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Take care.